Chapter 1. Dawn in the Insula. Waking to a cramped world. Early morning light filters dimly into a tiny fourth-floor room in a rickety Roman insula, a tenement block in the heart of imperial Rome. In this cramped one-room home, a family of commoners, plebeians, awakens to begin their day. The air is cool and carries the faint smell of smoke and yesterday's cooked porridge. Marcus, the paterfamilias, family father, stirs on a straw-filled mattress laid on the dusty brick floor. Beside him, his wife Livia and their 2 children share the narrow sleeping space, tangled in a threadbare wool blanket. There is no separate bedroom here. This single chamber is all the living space they have. 4 people in perhaps 10 square meters. Such crowding is typical in an insula, where multiple families often share a single floor or even a single room. Indeed, these buildings housed many families packed together, and privacy or personal space is virtually unknown. Marcus must be careful not to bump into the low, soot-stained ceiling as he sits up. Their room is just one of many stacked atop each other in this tall apartment house. As Marcus unlatches a small shutter, a weak dawn glow enters, revealing flaking plaster walls and a few simple household items. There is no glass in the window frame, just a wooden shutter, and no natural light enters when it's closed. Even now, with it ajar, the alley below is so narrow that little sunshine reaches this height. The family's entire world is here in this room. Rolled sleeping mats in one corner, a few clay lamps and bowls on a rickety shelf, and a small shrine on the wall for their household gods. Marcus's children, Titus, a skinny 2-year-old boy, and Aurelia, a quiet 6-year-old girl, rub their eyes as they wake on the mat. They know to be cautious as they move around. Space is so tight that any sudden motion could knock over the clay chamber pot or the jug of water in the corner. There is no toilet, no sink, and no running water in their home. Like all residents of the insula, they rely on public fountains and latrines in the city for water and sanitation. A simple ceramic pot serves as their nighttime toilet, and its contents will need to be emptied outside soon. Marcus listens to the familiar morning sounds through the thin wooden floorboards and walls. Below and above, neighbors are stirring. He can hear a baby crying 2 floors down and a couple arguing 1 room over. Sound travels easily through the flimsy construction. Their insula is built of cheap brick and timber, and it creaks ominously at times. In fact, these buildings are notorious for being structurally unsound and prone to collapse, especially the higher floors that sway in strong winds. Marcus casts a wary glance at a crack in the wall that seems a bit longer than it was a month ago. Rome's rulers have set a legal height limit of about 18 meters, roughly 5 to 6 stories, on insulae to curb the danger. But many landlords ignore the rules and build higher. Marcus's own tenement is at least 6 stories tall, a tottering giant that looms above the street like a cliff, with its upper floors leaning precariously. The family tries not to dwell on the risks, but in the back of everyone's mind is the knowledge that a collapse or fire could happen with little warning. This morning, as always, Marcus's first thoughts are practical: how to get water and how to break the family's fast. He gently takes up their water jar, which is half empty. The nearest public fountain is at the street corner below. Later, one of them will have to fetch more. For now, he pours a little into a cup. There is no real breakfast prepared, only some leftover barley poles, a thin porridge from yesterday. Livia quietly rekindles the small clay oil lamp and checks their grain supply stored in a clay urn. Grain is the lifeblood of the plebeian diet. The family's allotment of free grain part of the Roman state's grain dole, known as the annona, must be carefully managed. Each month, Marcus receives a ration of grain from the public granaries, a vital benefit for citizens in the city, and Livia grinds and cooks it into porridge or bread. They have a little millet and wheat flour left. Livia will mix it with water to make a gruel. She ladles some of last night's cold porridge into a bowl, thins it with a splash of water, and offers it to the children. It's bland and meager, but it will have to do. A modern person might balk at such a paltry morning meal, but for a Roman plebeian family, this is normal. Bread and porridge are the staples of their diet. On a good day, they might have a bit of olive oil or salt to add flavor, or a few olives to eat on the side. Milk is a rarity, only occasionally a splash of goat's milk for the children if they can get it. And honey is a treasured sweetener saved for special times. Titus, the 1-2-year-old, yawns and chews a crust of barley bread. Livia baked yesterday. At his age, a modern child might expect a hearty, varied breakfast, eggs, fruit, or cheese. But Titus has known nothing but simple fare, barley or wheat pulse nearly every day, maybe with some lentils or vegetables when available. The Romans actually refer to themselves as pulse eaters in older times. Even the poet Plautus joked that Romans lived on porridge. Marcus recalls an old saying that meat is for feast days. Indeed, meat is a luxury they rarely enjoy, perhaps a few times a year, on festival days, or if Marcus's patron gifts a token coin, they can afford a small piece of pork or some fish from the market. Fruits like dates or citrus are expensive imports, virtually unknown to his children, except as rare treats. Their daily sustenance is this: a thin grain gruel, coarse bread, maybe boiled beans or cabbage, and water or watered-down sour wine to drink. It's a diet that fills the belly if one is lucky, but it provides little protein or fat. Malnutrition is common among Rome's poor. Marcus can see, tick it in the pale complexion of Livia, and the way Aurelia's ribs are visible. Most of the poor, especially mothers and young children, likely suffer vitamin deficiencies and anemia. Livia, at age 30, already has missing teeth and chronic fatigue, signs of the hard nutritional life she's led. Yet, the family eats without open complaint. This is simply how life is for them. As they share sips of water and spoonfuls of porridge, the room slowly brightens with morning. Outside their little shuttered window, Marcus can hear the city coming alive. Distantly, the braying of a donkey and the clatter of a cart on stone streets echo upward. From a lower floor, someone empties a vessel with a wet slosh, likely tossing out wastewater. In these insulae, with no indoor plumbing or latrines, the common practice is to dump waste into the street below. Marcus grimaces, hoping the downstairs neighbor was careful. Roman law technically requires a warning shout when throwing refuse from above, to avoid hitting pedestrians, and indeed a moment later, a voice calls out a coarse alert. This has become part of the city's morning chorus, the calls of Gardes Low, or its Latin equivalent, as chamber pots are upended from countless windows. Immediately, a rank odor wafts upward. The street below will soon run with filth, human waste, mixing with yesterday's garbage and mud. A few slaves employed by the city will come through to sweep and clean later, but the stench never fully leaves. The packed neighborhoods reek with the smells of sewage, rotting food, and smoke, making a miasma of unhealthy air that all must endure. Titus wrinkles his nose. Even after years living here, the morning dump-out can turn his stomach. Marcus knows that disease lurks in these unsanitary conditions. Crammed living quarters and bad sanitation mean illnesses spread easily. Already he hears a neighbor coughing hard, perhaps coming down with one of the frequent fevers or ague that afflict the city folk. The family silently hopes to avoid sickness. They cannot afford a physician, and herbal remedies only do so much. In this era, a simple illness can be deadly, especially for the undernourished. Life expectancy is short. Few commoners live past their 40 seconds, and many children never reach adulthood. Marcus glances at little Aurelia, who looks drowsy and fragile. He silently prays, "She will stay healthy." They've already lost another infant in the past, a baby boy who died of a fever years ago. Such heartbreak is sadly routine in their world. Still, morning routines must go on. After the sparse breakfast, the family dresses for the day. Their clothing is humble and worn. Marcus dons a simple tunic of undyed wool, a coarse garment that he ties at the waist with a rope belt. It's the common uniform of plebeian men. His tunic has been patched many times by Livia. Over it, he has only a threadbare cloak to wear outdoors if it's cool. Livia and Aurelia each put on a plain stola, a long dress, in inexpensive fabric with little decoration. Once this stola was a dull off-white, but repeated use and hand-washings in the public fountain have tinted it grey-brown. They slip on simple sandals, thin soles of leather straps. For Titus, an active boy often running errands, a hand-me-down tunic from his father, cut shorter, suffices. Before Marcus steps out to begin his duties, the family takes a brief moment at their household shrine. In one dim corner of the room stands a tiny lararium, a shelf with small figurines and offerings to the lares and penates, the protective spirits of the home. By the fluttering lamplight, Marcus murmurs a morning prayer. He gently touches the little clay figures, representing their guardian spirits. The children clasp their hands, imitating their father's piety. Religion is deeply woven into their daily life. Every morning and evening, they invoke the gods to watch over their fragile existence. Marcus offers a pinch of incense, a luxury, but he uses just a little, and places a crust of bread from breakfast on the altar as an offering. Livia silently mouths a hope that Vesta, goddess of the hearth, will keep their homes safe from the ever-present threat of fire. For indeed, fire is one of the great fears in these insular blocks. A single spark from a lamp or cooking brazier could engulf the whole building. The family's small lamp they use for light is always a hazard. They never leave it lit unattended. With the brief rite completed, Marcus gently kisses his wife's forehead and tousles Titus's hair. It is time for him to go out into the city. Like many plebeians, Marcus's day will be a constant effort to secure the necessities of life. As he opens the flimsy wooden door of their unit, which leads to a narrow communal hallway, he is hit by a stronger odor from the night's accumulations and the heat trapped in the corridor. He steps carefully down a creaking wooden staircase that winds its way to the ground, passing doors behind which other families stir. The stairwell is dark. There are no lights, except what filters from each dwelling's doorway. He holds onto a rope railing they've rigged up for balance. In one spot, he notices with alarm that a section of the stair's edge has broken away, a dangerous gap. A neighbor recently fell through a rotten step and injured himself badly. It's one more reminder of how unsafe these buildings can be, especially at the higher levels. Emperor Augustus long ago made rules to limit height and presumably enforce maintenance. But clearly, landlords often neglect repairs. The insula is owned by a wealthy absentee landlord who delegates an insularius, building manager, to collect rent and handle issues. However, the insularius, often a slave or freedman agent, does the bare minimum. Maintenance costs money, and as long as the rent comes in, little is fixed. Marcus recalls how last winter a leak in their ceiling went unrepaired for weeks, causing mold and misery. Complaints achieved nothing until part of the roof nearly collapsed. Only then did the insularius hire some labourers for a quick patch-up. Such is life for the plebs. They have no real power to demand better living conditions from their social superiors. Marcus finally emerges onto the street, squinting in the daylight. The street is actually more of an alleyway, just wide enough for a cart to squeeze through. Tall insulae rise on either side, like canyon walls. Already, a few vendors are setting up their wares on the street corner, and a small crowd mills at the fountain waiting to fill water jars. Marcus takes a deep breath of the morning air. It's hardly fresh, but at least outside the worst of the night odors dissipate. From a window overhead, a cascade of dirty water suddenly splashes down, someone emptying laundry. Water, perhaps. Marcus steps aside nimbly. He's used to these hazards. A neighbor from the floor below, old Spurious, is also stepping out, coughing deeply. They exchange a nod. Neither speaks of it, but both know the other worried whether the building would stand another night. Every day survived is a quiet victory in this precarious world. Marcus straightens his tunic, holds his head up, and prepares to face the challenges of another day in imperial Rome. In this chapter, we saw the plebeian family's cramped living conditions in a Roman insula. The lack of space, overcrowding, unsafe construction, no plumbing, and pervasive dirt and smells are immediate hardships a modern person would find shocking. The family's simple breakfast of gruel and bread reflects a poor diet with little nutrition, far from modern variety. Yet this meager existence is normal to them. As dawn breaks, we leave Marcus heading out, carrying the weight of his family's survival on his shoulders. Chapter 2. Struggle for daily bread. Work and food of the plebeian. Marcus steps carefully along the uneven flagstones of the street, mindful of puddles and refuse. The sun has risen a little higher now, casting light on the bustling neighborhood. Rome, in the early Empire period, let us say around 1st century AD, is the largest city in the world, teeming with perhaps 1 million inhabitants, most of them plebeians like Marcus. The narrow lanes begin to fill with people, tradesmen opening their workshops, children running errands with bread loaves tucked under arm, water carriers hauling heavy buckets from the fountains. A faint haze of wood smoke curls upward. Many plebeian families are kindling small charcoal braziers to heat water or food in their doorways, since it's safer than cooking inside the flammable insular rooms. From somewhere comes the savory smell of frying onions. A street vendor preparing hot Pole's porridge to sell to those who can spare a few quadrans, copper coins, for a quick meal. Marcus's stomach rumbles at the scent, but he quickens his pace. He has morning duties to attend to before he can think of eating more. One of Marcus's daily struggles is to secure enough food for his family. While the monthly grain dole provides the raw grain, it doesn't cover all needs. He might need extra fuel for cooking, a bit of oil or vegetables to supplement the monotonous grain mush, maybe some garum, the fermented fish sauce Romans love, to give flavor. All that costs money, which is always in short supply. Marcus works as a day laborer on and off, but employment is not steady. Job insecurity and low pay plague urban plebeians like him. Some days, he finds work unloading cargo at the river docks or carrying stones at a construction site. Other days, he might get hired to help in a workshop repairing wagons. On unlucky days, there is no work at all, and he must idle in the forum or marketplace, hoping for a task. Today, however, Marcus has a different early morning obligation. He will perform the ritual of salutatio, the morning greeting, at the house of his patron. Marcus is a cliens, to a minor nobleman, Lucius Aemilius, a senator's cousin who maintains a network of dependents. In the social system of Rome, patronage links the lower-class plebs to wealthier patrons in a mutually beneficial relationship. The patron provides a small measure of financial help or favors. The client offers services, loyalty, and enhances the patron's prestige. For Marcus, being a client means he can occasionally receive a little money or food or assistance if he's in dire straits from Lucius. In return, Marcus must show respect and support, including literally showing up at the patron's door every morning at dawn to pay his respects. It may seem degrading to a modern person, but in ancient Rome, it is an accepted part of life. A daily morning reception, salutatio, where clients line up to greet their patron. So Marcus makes his way toward the Caelian hill, where Lucius Aemilius's house is, located a moderate distance from the crowded Subura district, where Marcus lives. As he walks, the streets widen a bit, and the buildings become slightly more spacious, an indication he's entering a better neighborhood. He passes by a grand public fountain, where sculpted stone lions spout water. A few well-dressed Romans, perhaps freedmen or lower equestrians, are filling large amphorae here, their slaves beside them. Marcus can tell he's among betters now by their attire. Some wear tunics with a stripe, indicating higher status, and a couple of men even sport togas, the garment of citizens for formal occasions. Marcus himself owns no toga. That privilege, though technically his right as a citizen, is too costly and impractical for a poor man's daily life. He carries on in his humble tunic, blending in with other clients heading in the same direction. Approaching the domus, house, of Lucius Aemilius, Marcus joins a small crowd of fellow plebeian clients at the gate. The contrast between this elegant townhouse and Marcus's insula is stark. The domus is only 2 stories tall, but sprawls horizontally, with multiple rooms and an inner courtyard. A decorative mosaic at the threshold reads, "Salve, welcome," and a household slave stands by the door to admit the clients one by one. Marcus waits his turn in a quiet queue. Some of the others here he knows by name, men from his neighborhood who rely on the patron too. They exchange polite nods but little conversation. This is a somewhat formal ritual. Inside, the atrium of the house is cool and shaded. Lucius Aemilius sits in a high-backed chair near the atrium's central impluvium, water basin, receiving each client in turn. Marcus, when his turn comes, steps forward and offers a respectful salutem, a greeting and a short wish for the patron's good health. He addresses Lucius as Domine, master, or simply, my patron. The patron nods, perhaps asks a perfunctory question about Marcus's family's well-being. Marcus keeps his head slightly bowed. The hierarchy is clear. Clients like him are of lower status and show deference in exchange for the patron's favor. Lucius Aemilius has about 20 clients gathered this morning. After the personal greetings, Lucius stands and announces he has a gift today. Each client will receive a small sportula, a basket of food, in honor of an upcoming festival. Marcus's heart leaps quietly. Such windfalls are precious. The sportula in this era often contains food or a token payment. Today, slaves bring out baskets for the clients containing a loaf of fine wheat bread, some olives, and a little jar of watered wine. It's modest, but to Marcus this is excellent news. White bread, made of good wheat flour, is a rare treat for his family, far better than their usual coarse barley loaves. He murmurs profuse thanks, as do the others. Patronage, at times, truly provides literal bread for the plebs, mirroring the famous concept of panem et circenses, bread and circuses, by which Roman elites maintain public favor. Today, Lucius Aemilius likely expects his generosity will earn him public goodwill or political support. Marcus certainly feels grateful and thus more loyal. With the formalities done, Marcus and the other clients accompany Lucius partway toward the forum, a custom known as deductio, essentially escorting the patron to show his importance. They fall in behind Lucius as he walks, like a small retinue, in the jostling streets. Onlookers see this and recognize Lucius as a man of influence, with many followers. Marcus feels a mix of feelings, a tinge of pride that he has a patron to attach to. Some plebeians do not, and are truly on their own, and also a hint of resignation that even this daily subservience is needed to survive. A modern person might feel humiliated to line up for a handout from a rich acquaintance every morning, but in Roman society, mutual obligations define the social fabric. Marcus doesn't see it as begging. It's the way things work. He gives honor and some vote of support in the assembly if needed. Lucius gives a bit of material aid. That's the unspoken contract. After a short walk, Lucius dismisses his clients near the forum, allowing them to go about their business. Marcus carefully tucks the basket under his arm. He contemplates bringing it straight home to Livia. She would no doubt be delighted to have fresh white bread and olives for the children. However, Marcus also has an opportunity now. Being near the Forum Romanum, the central public square, early in the day, means he might catch some potential day labor if he waits around. Many laborers gather at certain spots in the Forum, hoping to be hired for construction, transport, or other menial jobs. Marcus decides to try his luck there before returning home. The family's needs are constant. A little extra coin could buy beans, lentils, or firewood. He heads toward an anaress area by the Temple of Castor, where he knows contractors sometimes recruit porters and haulers in the mornings. Along the way, Marcus passes the Grand Basilica, Julia, and near it, a small crowd of plebs stands around a bulletin board, the public postings of news and edicts. They are reading notices, perhaps an announcement about the next grain distribution schedule, or a decree about street cleanings. Marcus weaves through, momentarily curious if any news about grain prices or the water supply is posted. But he cannot read. Like most poorer Romans, he has only rudimentary literacy, so he moves on. In this heart of Rome, Marcus feels both awe and alienation. Surrounding him are magnificent marble temples and columns, reminders of Rome's wealth and power. There is the gilded facade of the Temple of Saturn, the towering arch celebrating a past victory, statues of gods and past heroes. Yet here at ground level, he stands among dozens of scruffy men like himself, eyes scanning for a wet, potential employer. It's a striking image, the glory of Rome above, and the gritty reality of its common citizens below. Marcus might think to himself that all this splendor wasn't built for people like him. It was built on the backs of people like him. After some waiting, Marcus is fortunate to be picked out by a foreman who needs extra hands to unload a barge at the river docks. The foreman shouts that he'll pay 1 denarius for a half-day's work to each man hired. Marcus jumps at this. A denarius, a silver coin, is roughly a day's wage for unskilled labor, and while it won't make him rich, it can buy a decent amount of staple food. He sets off with a small group toward the Tiber River, where warehouses and wharves line the banks. For the next several hours, Marcus bends his back to the work of hauling amphorae and sacks from the boats to the storage. Laboring in Rome is tough physical work. Marcus and his fellow plebs sweat under the sun, muscles straining as they carry heavy loads. He can feel the ache in his shoulders and remembers an old injury flaring, a reminder that by 40, many laborers are worn out or worse. The foreman bawls at them to hurry. There's always pressure to offload quickly. Despite the toil, Marcus is used to it and takes a quiet pride in doing his part. These laborers exchange banter when the foreman is out of earshot, joking about the smell of the fish sauce amphorae or cursing the weight of marble blocks destined for some new temple. They are the invisible force that keeps the city running, carrying grain, bricks, wine, oil. Few aristocrats ever think about the people behind the scenes. A modern observer might note how precarious Marcus's employment is. He has no contract, no guarantee of work tomorrow, no insurance if he gets hurt. If he is injured and cannot work, his family could starve unless the patron or a charitable temple helps. It's a constant tightrope. By midday, the unloading job is done. Marcus receives his denarius. The silver coin clinks in his palm, a reassuring weight. He thanks the foreman and wipes sweat from his brow. It's time to head home and bring Livia both the sportula basket and some of this pay. On the way, he decides to stop at the open-air market, the Masalum, to spend a small portion of the coin on food enhancements. The market is lively at midday. Stalls of vegetables, fruits, bread, and a few selling cheap cuts of meat. Marcus knows better than to buy meat. It's expensive, and fresh meat is a delicacy reserved for the wealthy or special feasts. But he finds a stall with wilted vegetables on discount. With a few copper coins, he buys a bunch of slightly bruised carrots and some cabbage leaves. These will add nutrition and flavor to their grain porridge tonight. He also splurges on a small piece of dried salted fish, not enough to fill a belly, but enough to crumble into a stew for taste. Finally, he refills the family's small flask of tam, olive oil at an oil merchant. Oil is precious for both cooking and their single lamp. Marcus walks back through the winding lanes of the Subura toward his insula. It is now the 6th hour, around noon, and the sun is high and hot. Many Romans take a rest at this time, and Marcus himself feels the fatigue of the morning's labor. Reaching the insula, he climbs the steep stairs with effort. Livia greets him anxiously at the door. She always worries when he's out working or seeking work. When she sees the white bread and olives in the patron's basket, her eyes light up. Marcus smiles and gives her the basket, as well as the vegetables and the remainder of the coin. For a moment, their hovel of a room feels a bit brighter. Such small blessings, a loaf of fine bread, a few coins, have an outsized impact on their morale. The children, on seeing the basket, gather around eagerly. Aurelia hasn't tasted white bread in months. Livia decides to save it for the evening meal, perhaps to make a celebratory simple supper with the olives and fish in a stew. They all settle in for a short midday rest. In Rome, even the poor take a pause around noon if they can. The hottest part of the day makes work difficult. Marcus uses this time to catch his breath, reclining on the mat. Titus is responsible today for going to fetch fresh water, now that the initial morning rush at the fountain is over. The boy takes the clay jar and heads downstairs to the public fountain at the corner. It's a task he's done since he was 7 or 8, building his strength. Titus waits in line behind several others, slaves and children of plebs like himself, and then fills the jar with cool aqueduct water, streaming from a spout carved like a wolf's head. The public fountains of Rome are one of the great blessings of the city. Thanks to the aqueducts, clean water is available free in each district, but carrying it up 4 flights of stairs is no small feat. Titus strains to lug the heavy jar back home, carefully, 1 step at a time. By the time he returns, his arms ache and some water sloshed out onto his tunic, but he proudly sets the jar down. Livia pats his shoulder in thanks and pours each of them a drink. The water is a welcome refreshment in the heat. During this midday lull, the family talks quietly. Little Aurelia plays with a rag doll in the corner, humming a tune she learned from a neighbor. Titus pesters his father with questions. He's a curious boy. He asks what the loud crash in the night was. Indeed, they all heard a distant crash, likely some shoddy building's roof caving in, or a cart accident outside. Marcus doesn't know, but jests that perhaps Jupiter was sending thunder because someone angered him. Livia brings up news she heard from another woman at the bakery. Apparently, there's a rumor that the grain supply ships from Egypt have been delayed by storms. This causes Marcus to frown. Any interruption in the grain supply can mean shortage and hunger for plebeians, and sometimes riots. The Annona, grain dole, is the lifeline. If it falters, people panic. Marcus hopes it's just a rumor or a brief delay, not a major issue. The emperor currently, perhaps Trajan, if we imagine early 2nd century, or another if earlier, is expected to keep the grain flowing. At least we got this month's portion, Livia says, touching the grain jar. They both know families whose breadwinner failed to claim the grain on time or lost the eligibility token. Those families suffer greatly. Talking of news, Titus excitedly mentions something he overheard from a friend. Gladiatorial games are scheduled in a few days at the amphitheater, the Colosseum. The prospect of games, free public entertainment, is thrilling to a boy. He begs Marcus that they go see at least one match. Marcus is torn. He himself enjoys the occasional spectacle of gladiators or chariot races when he can go, and indeed, public games are one. The few pleasures for the urban poor. The admission is usually free, thanks to a sponsoring magistrate or the emperor's largesse. However, attending means losing a day's potential wages and dealing with huge crowds. He tells Titus they will see if there's no pressing work, and if the crowd isn't too dangerous, perhaps they'll attend one bout. Titus grins, already envisioning the excitement of the arena, the colorful gladiators, the roaring crowd, maybe even exotic animals. For a plebeian kid, the circus, as in bread and circuses, is a magical escape from daily drudgery. Marcus knows this and is silently glad his son can at least have something to look forward to. In truth, Marcus himself recalls being a child, thrilled by chariot races in the Circus Maximus, cheering for the blues or greens, the popular racing factions. Those memories bring a nostalgic smile to his face for a moment. As the hottest part of the day passes, the family readies to resume their tasks. Marcus will soon head out again to see if there's any more work or errands, and Livia plans to take Aurelia to a nearby shrine in the afternoon. It's the market day of Juno, and she wants to offer a small prayer for their daughter's health at Juno's temple, being the protectress of women and children. They all understand that every member of the family has roles to play. Even little Aurelia sometimes helps her mother with weaving small mats or carrying light items. Childhood in a plebeian family is short and full of responsibility. Titus might start an apprenticeship or a small trade in a few years, if they can arrange it. Otherwise, he will be working labor like his father as soon as he's strong enough. There is no formal schooling for them. Only the relatively well-off can send boys to a tutor. However, Titus has picked up some basics of letters and numbers from an old man in the building who used to be a clerk. Many plebs are functionally illiterate, but Marcus actually encouraged Titus to learn, thinking it might give him a slight edge, perhaps to become a scribe's assistant or a shopkeeper, rather than pure manual labor. Time will tell. Before heading out, Marcus takes a piece of charcoal and marks a small note on the wall near the door. It's his crude way of keeping track of debts and payments. He owes a few sesterces, small coins, to a fellow for some firewood last week. He hasn't forgotten. Many plebeians live in a web of informal debts, borrowing a bit here and there from neighbors or local lenders when times are tough, then repaying after payday. Falling into deep debt is a constant danger. In the old days of the Republic, debt could even mean debt bondage or slavery if not paid, though by the early empire such harsh practices have eased somewhat. It's still a worry. Marcus is determined to stay afloat financially, however, marginally. Aurelia tugs at her mother's tunic, a reminder that it's time for the errand. To the shrine, Livia takes the girl's hand, and with a quick word to Marcus, they depart down the stairs. Marcus follows shortly, heading again into the streets to see if he might do a bit more work, or at least gather news in the afternoon. Titus tags along with his father for now, as his chores are done. The street by their insula is livelier in late afternoon. The smell of cooking pulses from various doorways, people preparing their main meal around the 9th hour, that is to say, mid-afternoon, which is typical for many plebes to have dinner somewhat early. Marcus navigates past a group of children, kicking a stuffed leather ball. They scatter out of the way of a mule cart coming through. The cart trundles by, laden with amphorae, and Marcus reflexively shields Titus from getting too close to its wheels. In these crowded lanes, accidents are common. People can get crushed by careless driving of carts. Father and son make their way to a slightly more open street, where a public water trough and a baker's shop are located. Marcus considers using a bit of his remaining coin to buy a fresh loaf from the baker. The smell of baking bread is enticing. However, seeing a small queue and knowing Livia will cook something with the goods he brought, he decides against spending more coin now. As a small coin, saved is needed. Instead, he stops at the trough to splash some water on his face and neck, washing off the grime of labor. Titus eagerly does the same, playfully flicking water at his father. Marcus chuckles softly. These small moments of relief, cool water on a hot day, are cherished. They wander towards the edge of the Subura district, where it meets one of the main roads. Here stands a modest shrine to the Lares of the crossroads. Lares, Compitales. It's a tiny altar with figures of guardian spirits that protect the neighborhood. Colorful ribbons and cheap wreaths adorn it, left from a recent festival. Marcus pauses and lights a bit of incense at this shrine as well, a habit he keeps whenever passing. It's partly faith, partly perhaps superstition, but plebeians like Marcus hold strongly to these local deities who watch over their streets. During the annual Compitalia festival, plebs celebrate these very lares with enthusiasm, hanging dolls and balls of wool to represent the household members. Dolls for free people, wool balls for slaves, a sign of thanks that the lares protected all lives under their care. Marcus remembers the last Compitalia. The neighborhood came together with makeshift cakes and wine. There was music and even some dancing in the street. Such communal moments lighten the burden of their daily grind. Now, as the sun starts to dip westward, Marcus decides there's not much more work to find today. It's better to return home and prepare for the evening. Titus reminds him about maybe visiting the public baths, a near-daily routine for many, including the poor, since the bathhouses are affordable and offer hygiene and socializing. Marcus ponders. He has a bit of time and a few small coins. The public baths charge only a token fee, often as low as a quadrans, the smallest coin, deliberately kept cheap, so even the poor can attend. He agrees that they can go bathe quickly before dinner, and that will be a treat for Titus too, who loves the big pool. They head to the local balneum bathhouse, a medium-sized bathing facility tucked in between shops. The building emits clouds of steam from its roof vents. Inside, Marcus pays the trifling fee to the balneator, bath attendant, literally one small bronze coin for each of them. They first enter the apoditerium, changing room, where they strip off their dusty tunics. Like most plebs, they own no personal lockers, but they tuck their clothes in a corner and keep an eye out to prevent theft. Stepping into the warm, humid air of the tepidarium, warm room, Marcus immediately feels his muscles relax. The tepidarium's walls are lined with benches. Warm water runs in basins. He and Titus rinse the day's sweat and grime from their skin. Next, they move to the caldarium, hot bath, essentially a large hot water pool in a steamy chamber. They immerse themselves. Titus splashes gleefully until Marcus hushes him to mind others. For a few minutes, Marcus closes his eyes, enjoying the rare sensation of deep warmth soaking into his limbs. Bathing is one of the few comforts accessible to a plebeian, a small luxury subsidized by the state's investment in public health. In here, distinctions of class blur slightly. Although the richer citizens usually have their own bathing hours, or even private baths, plenty of everyday folks of various means mingle in the public baths. Marcus might find himself sitting next to a shopkeeper, a off-duty soldier, or even a well-to-do freedman. They might chat about the weather, the latest chariot race results, or grumble about the smell in the Subura. Bathhouses are social, levelers to a degree. After soaking, they scrape off sweat and dirt, using strigils, metal scraping tools, provided at the bath. Titus finds it fun to copy his father, dragging the curved metal over his arms and back to clean the skin. They then dunk in the frigidarium, cold pool, for a brisk cool-off. The chill water shocks, but also invigorates. Marcus takes a moment to wash his thin hair and beard. He doesn't have soap. Soap is known but not common. Romans often used oil, which they scraped off, but water and scrubbing suffice for a basic clean. Feeling refreshed and far cleaner than this morning, father and son finally step out to retrieve their tunics and get dressed. The sun is low when they exit the baths. In the golden dusk light, Rome's bustle takes on a different character. Many are heading home with their purchases from the markets. You see everyday Romans carrying baskets of bread, vegetables, oil flasks, not unlike the basket Marcus brought earlier. Artisans close up their workshops and some street vendors shout discount offers before night falls. There is a hint of smoke in the air again, as many hearths and braziers are lit for cooking evening meals. Marcus and Titus walk back to their insula. They pass a group of other men gathered outside a wine shop. These are idle plebs who choose to spend their few coins on cheap wine to wash away worries. One or two already look tipsy, gesturing wildly in debate, likely discussing the latest exploits of the beloved charioteer from the Green faction, or gossip about a scandal in the Emperor's palace. Drinking establishments popinate the city, offering sour wine and maybe stewed beans or peas for a small price. Marcus doesn't frequent them often. He cannot spare much money for drink, and he prefers to be home in the evenings. But he understands the temptation. Life is hard, and many seek escape in a wine cup. At home, Livia and Aurelia have returned from the shrine. Livia seems content. She lit a candle at the temple of Juno, and says a kind priestess there gave Aurelia a small blessing. They've also been tidying the little room, and have already started a cook fire in a tiny brazier on the windowsill. A savory smell fills the space. Livia has combined the carrots, cabbage, and salted fish with grain to make a thick stew. She even crumbled some dried herbs, which she grows in a tiny pot by the window, a few sprigs of rosemary and thyme to improve the flavor. The family's spirits are relatively high tonight because of the bounty Marcus brought. When he reveals the white panis, bread, from the patron, there are delighted gasps. Livia decides to save half of that fine loaf for tomorrow. The other half she slices and toasts on the brazier to dip into the stew, so everyone will taste it. The olives, too, are apportioned. Each gets a couple of the briny treats, something to savor. They all sit on the floor around the pot as evening falls, sharing the meal. The taste of vegetables and fish in their porridge is a welcome change from plain poles. By modern standards, it's a simple, perhaps bland dinner. But for them, tonight feels almost festive. Aurelia giggles at something her brother says. He's recounting a scene from the baths, where an overweight bather slipped in the pool, which made some others laugh. Marcus chuckles, admonishing Titus to be respectful, but Livia even cracks a smile. The orange glow of lamplight, their single oil lamp lit once more, dances on the walls as dusk outside turns to dark. Through the window opening, the noises of Rome by night begin. Distant shouts of hawkers closing shop, the clatter of a cavalry patrol's hooves on stone, the urban cohorts, or vigiles, doing their rounds to keep order and watch for fires, and a general murmur of countless voices echoing through the labyrinth of buildings. When the food is finished, hunger satisfied for now, the family continues to converse quietly. Aurelia grows, sleepy, and crawls onto Livia's lap. The night air is warm and still. Marcus feels the daily fatigue catching up, his limbs heavy from work and the relaxing bath, yet his mind is still active. Often, in the evenings, he reflects on what tomorrow might bring. Will he find work again? Will rent stay affordable? There's also an underlying worry about their building's safety at night. He steps to the little window and peers out. The street below is now cloaked in darkness, except for a couple of flickering torches mounted on a wall. Rome's streets are mostly unlit at night, which means everyone must tread carefully, if outside with a lantern ideally. Up above, he can actually see a few stars, if he cranes to a patch of sky. But mostly the view is of the hulking outline of adjacent insulae. Marcus hears a sudden splash and curse from below. Someone must have thrown out wastewater without warning, hitting an unlucky passerby. Or perhaps a chamber pot emptied late. The curse, suggests it hit its mark. Marcus shakes his head. The night has its own hazards. Inside, Livia has laid Aurelia down on their mat and is gently singing a lullaby, an old Latin nursery song, invoking the household gods to watch the children. Titus is fiddling with a little wooden toy chariot he carved from scrap wood. He's enamored with the idea of being a charioteer someday. Marcus sits beside his son and, taking the toy, starts explaining in a low voice the importance of getting enough rest, a subtle hint that playtime is over. Titus protests, wanting to hear a story. He begs his father for one of those grand tales of heroes, or maybe some gossip about the emperor. Marcus thinks for a moment, then decides a calm story will do no harm. So he recounts a bit of the legend of Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of Rome, emphasizing how they were saved and nurtured by a she-wolf. He knows Titus likes the part where the mighty Romulus grows and builds the city, though he tactfully omits the part about Romulus eventually killing his brother, not the most soothing bedtime detail. Instead, he transitions to how Romulus welcomed all the common folk to join his new city, which strikes a chord. So you see, Marcus whispers, from the very start, Rome was filled with people like us, the common people, and they were important, for without them, the city would be empty. Remember that, son. Even if we are poor, we are part of Rome's greatness. Titus nods solemnly. It's a gentle lesson in dignity despite poverty that Marcus tries to impart. Livia lies down next to Aurelia, stroking the child's hair. Marcus and Titus soon join, stretching out on the straw-stuffed mattress and thin blankets that serve as their bedding. They have no separate beds or rooms. The whole family sleeps side by side on the floor. This is how it is for most plebeians in insulae. In fact, the very concept of privacy is foreign to them. Everyone knows each other's lives intimately through proximity. Tonight, a merciful breeze wafts through the window, relieving some of the stuffiness. But Marcus does not extinguish the oil lamp completely. He turns it low, leaving a dim glow. One reason is to deter rodents. Another is the psychological comfort it gives against the oppressive dark. As they drift towards sleep, the city's noises continue. There is singing somewhere, likely revelers or a religious procession for a deity's feast day. Dogs bark in the distance. Occasionally, heavy footfalls echo as a patrol of vigiles, night watchmen, pass by, carrying lanterns and staffs. These vigiles are both firefighters and a rudimentary police force, instituted by the first Emperor Augustus to curb the twin threats of fire and crime in Rome's nights. Marcus is reassured knowing they are about. Years ago, before their presence, the Suburra's nights were truly lawless, with thieves and ruffians ruling until dawn. Now at least there's some measure of order, though one still hears of muggings or brawls after dark. Suddenly, the family is startled by a brief scream echoing down the street, followed by laughter. It might be a drunken scuffle or a prank. Hard to tell. Livia tenses, and Marcus quietly listens for any further commotion. The laughter fades. Likely nothing serious. Perhaps youths stumbling out of a wine shop, or someone reacting to slop thrown from a window. Such random cries in the night are not unusual. It takes a moment for everyone's hearts to stop pounding. Marcus mutters a quick prayer to Silvanus, a guardian of night and woods, to keep the household safe. He knows, though, that fire is the big fear. Any smell of smoke at night sends shivers through the insula's residents. He recalls the great fire that occurred decades ago, if we imagine Nero's time in 64 AD, for instance. Tales passed down of whole swaths of the city, many insulae among them, consumed by flames, while people ran for their lives. In their building, they have a loosely organized plan. If a fire starts, everyone is to run down immediately. No time to save belongings. The vigiles keep watch for fires, but with wood construction and open flames for lamps and cooking, any building could be an inferno in minutes. Marcus glances at their own brazier, now long extinguished after cooking, and the lamp's tiny flame, making sure all is safe. The children, resilient as they are, have fallen asleep despite the momentary alarm. Titus softly snores. Aurelia curls like a kitten next to her mother. Livia is awake, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. She meets Marcus's gaze. In that quiet moment, they share unspoken thoughts, worry for the future, gratitude for making it through another day, determination to do it all again tomorrow. Marcus gently reaches over and squeezes Livia's hand. They don't speak aloud, so as not to wake the little ones, but they don't need words. Their partnership is one of enduring the daily hardships together, a small haven of love and stability amid a chaotic environment. Outside, the noises gradually die down. The majority of Rome's inhabitants settle into whatever rest they can find. In the insula, one can hear a baby crying now and then, or the creak of someone shifting on a creaky cot upstairs. But overall, the building is quieter than it's been all day. Marcus finally allows his tired eyes to close. He lies on his back, feeling the hard floor through the thin mat, but he's long accustomed to discomfort. His feet ache from carrying weights. His back has a knot of pain. These aches are normal. He'll likely wake with stiffness and maybe a cough from the dust, but so it goes. As he drifts to sleep, his last conscious thought is perhaps gratitude that tonight the family's bellies are full, not always a given, and they are together and safe for now. For a modern person, this scene of a plebeian family's day might seem unbearably difficult. The constant physical discomfort, the lack of privacy, the unsanitary conditions, the grinding work for meager rewards, and the total absence of modern amenities. Indeed, imagining oneself in Marcus's place, it's easy to feel that one wouldn't last a day in these circumstances. Where is the soft bed, the secure home, the plentiful food, the personal freedom to choose one's path? All these things we take for granted in a developed modern society are virtually absent here. Yet, for Marcus, Livia, and their children, this is simply life, neither extraordinary nor hopeless, just the everyday existence of Rome's common folk. They find moments of joy, a festival, a good meal, a child's laughter, and they endure the sorrows, loss, hunger, oppression, with stoicism. As the family sleeps, the oil in their lamp finally sputters out. Darkness envelops the tiny room. In their dreams, maybe they escape the cramped insula for a time. Who knows? The city of Rome breathes and shifts around them, a giant organism of which they are, but tiny cells. The monumental architecture and luxurious villas of the rich stand silent in the night. But it's in these overcrowded insulae that most of Rome's people live and die. The greatness of Rome's empire is built on their backs, yet their individual names are seldom recorded in history. But their lives matter. They keep the bakeries, workshops, docks, and markets running. They cheer in the circuses. They populate the legions in times of war. They are Rome as much as the nobles and emperors. Thus ends this day in the life of a Roman plebeian family. It was an ordinary day. No grand events, just a cycle of work, worry, small pleasures, and family togetherness under challenging conditions. If a person from the 21st century were suddenly dropped into this scenario, they would face physical hardships, overcrowding, grime, manual labor, simple diet, and psychological strain, the lack of autonomy under report, strict social hierarchy, the ever-present risks of disease or disaster that are far beyond normal modern experience. Truly, a modern individual would struggle to last even a day living as a poor citizen in ancient Rome without the comforts and rights we consider basic. Yet, as we reflect on that, we also gain a deep appreciation for the resilience of the people who did live this life. Generation after generation of plebeians survived and even thrived in their own way within these harsh parameters. They developed tight-knit communities, traditions, and coping mechanisms. Religion and festivals gave them hope and breaks from routine. Patronage provided a safety net, albeit a tenuous one. Family bonds gave meaning to their toil. They complained about their lot. Roman satirists like Juvenal make it clear plebeians knew well how rough their life was, quipping that all they wanted was bread and circuses. But they also took pride in being Romans, with the freedoms that entailed, however limited those freedoms were for the poor compared to the elite. In the following chapters, we will delve deeper into some of those very aspects that help the plebeians endure. The role of religion and festivals in providing solace and social cohesion, and the interactions of plebeians with the elite class that both oppressed and, occasionally, assisted them. But for now, as night deepens, we leave Marcus and his family in the vulnerable fabric of slumber. Religion tomorrow, and festivals at first in plebeian life, the cycle will begin anew. Another day, as a Roman plebeian, in the crowded, vibrant, unforgiving city of Rome. This chapter depicted how a plebeian secures daily necessities through work and patronage. We saw Marcus performing the salutatio to receive a sportula, gift of food, from his patron, illustrating patron-client dynamics. We followed him through manual labor typical for plebs and noted the insecurity of such jobs. The family's meal and visit to the public baths highlighted resources available to plebeians, grain, dole, cheap baths, and how they made do with limited means. Throughout, we're reminded that a modern person would find the lack of stable income, basic comforts, and personal autonomy extremely challenging to endure. As dawn breaks on another day, the routine in Marcus's insula begins again. But let us step back from the hour-to-hour struggle and look at a larger force that shapes and enlivens plebeian life: religion. For the common people of Rome, religious belief and ritual are not mere formalities or occasional observances. They infuse everyday life with meaning and rhythm. In the midst of hardship, faith in the gods provides comfort and a sense of order. The plebeians, like all Romans, hold a deep conviction that if the gods are honored and the proper rites performed, their lives and city will be blessed with what the Romans call pax deorum, the peace of the gods. Conversely, neglect or impiety could invite divine wrath, something they can ill afford. Thus, even a poor family like Marcus's dedicates time and resources, however scant, to worship and festivals. In the corner of Marcus's one-room home stands the small lararium shrine we saw, where the family pays respect to the lares and penates household gods every single day. The paterfamilias, Marcus, is effectively the priest of his household, leading domestic devotions just as he did yesterday morning, and will do again today. This morning, before heading out, Marcus lights a bit of incense at the shrine and whispers a prayer to the family's guardian spirits. Many plebeian families do this routinely. It's a way to seek protection for the day. The notion of separating secular life from spiritual life doesn't exist for them. All aspects of life involve the gods. When Livia bakes bread, she might throw a pinch of flour into the hearth fire as an offering to Vesta, goddess of the hearth. When Titus leaves to fetch water, Livia may quietly invoke the nymphs of the spring that feeds the aqueduct. Countless little acts of faith dot their day. To a modern person, some of these might seem superstitious or overly ritualistic, but for the Romans, it's simply proper behavior. Mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. Apart from the household cult, plebeians also eagerly participate in public religious festivals. Rome's calendar is crowded with festivals. Feriae, some solemn, some joyful, and many of these are public holidays on which no work is done, and the state sponsors games or feasts. This is a boon for the plebs. Not only do they get days of respite from labor, but festivals often include distributions of food or wine, public banquets, or entertainments that they can freely enjoy. In a sense, festivals are the safety valve of social tension, times when the gulf between rich and poor narrows a bit in shared celebration. Marcus's family, though struggling daily, look forward to these special days with genuine excitement. One such festival, in the near future, is the Saturnalia, Rome's famous winter holiday. As December approaches, there is a subtle lift in mood, even in the dingy insulae. Saturnalia is a time of revelry and role reversal, dedicated to Saturn, the god of the Golden Age. For a few days, originally one day, on December 17th, later extended to a week, the social norms loosen. Masters serve their slaves, or at least symbolically treat them as equals at banquets. People exchange gifts, wear colorful clothes, including the pileus, a cap symbolizing freedom, worn by slaves during the festival to mark their temporary liberty, and greet each other with shouts of Io Saturnalia. Marcus and Livia recall fondly the Saturnalia of past years. Even though they have no slaves of their own to invert roles with, the spirit of the festival pervades the whole city. Patrons like Lucius Aemilius are known to give extra gifts to their clients at Saturnalia. One year, Lucius provided a nice dinner for all his clients, where Marcus and others got to dine in their patron's atrium, served by his household, an imitation of the masters serving slaves tradition. It was simple fare, but to sit and be treated courteously by those of higher status, even for an evening, was a memorable novelty. In another Saturnalia, the city praetor hosted a public banquet in the forum. Huge tables, laden with bread, fruit, and wine, were open to all. Marcus took his family, and though it was a crush of people, they managed to enjoy fresh figs and nut cakes, rare treats, and brought home a jug of wine, distributed to each family. The children laughed to see everyone wearing the pileus cap and joking in the streets. Titus even saw a respected senator making a fool of himself singing in public while a slave teased him. Social hierarchies are upended in a playful way during Saturnalia. It's as if the world turns upside down. Slaves can speak freely, no fear of punishment for a joke or frank remark. Commoners can gamble openly and sing loudly, and a general atmosphere of equality, or at least the illusion of it, prevails for those few days. This respite from daily subservience and hardship is psychologically rejuvenating. One can imagine how a festival like Saturnalia helps plebeians cope the rest of the year. It gives them something to look forward to and a cherished memory of a time when life felt abundant and joyful. Now, beyond Saturnalia, the Roman religious calendar offers many other festivals relevant to plebeians. For example, in early spring, there's the Lupercalia, February 15th, an ancient rite of purification and fertility. Marcus has watched the Luperci, priests of Lupercus, run nearly naked through the streets, whipping bystanders lightly with goatskin thongs, a bizarre spectacle by modern standards. But in Rome, it's believed this practice blesses women with fertility and chases away evil spirits. Livia doesn't necessarily enjoy that chaotic festival. It can be rowdy, but she did stand out one year, hoping a swipe of the goatskin might aid her in conceiving again after a miscarriage. Such is the mix of belief and hope that guides their actions. There's also the Cerealia in mid-April, honoring Ceres, the goddess of grain, very important to plebeians as she is essentially the patron of the grain supply that feeds them. During Cerealia, games are held, and one custom, Marcus recalls, is the release of foxes with torches tied to their tails in the circus, a strange ritual symbolizing fertility of the fields by burning away pests. At least that's one interpretation. More tangibly, sometimes extra grain or even fresh bread is handed out to the poor at Ceres temples during this festival, courtesy of wealthy officials currying favor. Marcus never misses paying respects to Ceres. He knows his family's stomach depends on her goodwill, and the emperor's, who plays the role of ensuring her bounty reaches them. Another deeply ingrained practice is the observance of the calends, nons, and ides of each month, with small rites. The calends, first day of every month, is sacred to Juno. Many plebeian women like Livia will light a candle to Juno on that day, praying for the well-being of their households. The ides, 13th or 15th day, is often dedicated to Jupiter. Sacrifices, or at least prayers, are made city-wide to the king of the gods. Even if Marcus cannot afford to sacrifice a ram or bull like the wealthy might, he still offers incense or a cake at a street shrine of Jupiter on the ides. It is these regular observances that give a sense of time and continuity. They also break the monotony of labor. Often the days on which public religious ceremonies occur are days off from work. By law, no lawsuits or official business can be conducted on many holy days. So religion literally grants days of rest, which any plebeian welcomes. For the plebs, religion isn't usually a personal, introspective affair. It's communal and civic. Whole families and neighborhoods join in processions. Children like Titus and Aurelia learn early how to throw flower petals in front of a passing deity's statue, how to cheer Io Triumph, or sing refrain in a hymn. There are also neighborhood festivals, such as the aforementioned Compitalia, Festival of the Lares of the Crossroads, which is very much a plebeian celebration, organized in each vicus, district, by local residents, and often associated with the plebeian class and even former slaves. During Compitalia, the community comes together in the streets. Altars at crossroads are bedecked with garlands. Neighbors share simple food, like honey cakes, and there might be games or dancing. It's a grassroots holiday, though under Augustus, some elements were reorganized for political reasons, and plebeians take pride in honoring their local spirits with enthusiasm. In Marcus's insula, the insularius, building manager, might allow a small garland to be hung at the entrance, and the residents could pool a few coins to buy a sacrificial pig, or, more modestly, a chicken to slaughter for the lares. The meat from that offering would then be cooked and shared in a communal meal by the tenants, a rare occasion of feasting for them. Marcus remembers such a shared feast one year. Each family contributed what they could: spices, wine, bread, and they stewed the pig with herbs, and every person got a portion. That night, the insula wasn't just a place of many strangers living atop each other, but a kind of temporary family, all Romans together thanking the lares. These moments strengthen a sense of community among the poor. When you suffer together, bonding rituals like this help remind everyone that they are not alone in their plight. Not all religious activity is joyous, of course. There are omens and superstitions that plebeians heed scrupulously, out of fear that ignoring them could bring misfortune. For instance, if Marcus sees a hawk fly from left to right in the morning, he takes it as a good omen. If a raven croaks ominously, he might postpone a planned venture. Livia is careful not to sweep dust out the front door after dark, a superstition saying it might sweep away the household luck. And should someone in the insula fall gravely ill, others whisper about which god might be displeased and how to placate them. Perhaps an offering at the temple of Aesculapius, the god of healing, on the Tiber island, would be arranged if enough neighbors chip in. Illness is rampant due to malnutrition and unsanitary conditions, and with limited medical knowledge, many plebeians turn to divine help when sick. They wear amulets, like a small phallic charm or a bulla, for children to ward off the evil eye. Each household might have its little rituals to guard against plague or fire. The city itself organizes major public religious events that plebeians attend en masse. One is the supplicatio, a day of public prayer and thanksgiving, often decreed after a military victory or to avert a crisis. On such days, statues of gods are placed on couches, the lectisternium, and food is set before them, as people prostrate or kneel in the temples, and even on the streets, collectively begging the gods' favor. Marcus participated in a city-wide supplication a few years ago, when a fearful plague was afflicting Rome. He, along with tens of thousands, walked in a long procession to the Capitoline temple, laurel branches in hand, chanting prayers to Jupiter, Juno, and Apollo for deliverance. To a modern person, this might look like mass hysteria or a quaint ritual, but to those Romans, it was a vital communal action, an embodiment of their dependence on divine forces. And when the plague eventually subsided, they truly believed their prayers and piety helped, with credit, of course, also given to the gods, and maybe the emperor for his sacrifices. Another spectacle is the adventus of the gods during certain festivals. For example, during the Roman Games, Ludi Romani, there's a grand procession where statues of the gods, escorted by priests and attendants, are paraded on wagons into the Circus Maximus. Plebeians line the streets to watch. It's as thrilling as any parade today. Children sit on parents' shoulders to glimpse the huge bearded statue of Jupiter or the solemn effigy of Minerva passing by, accompanied by flute music and incense smoke. It reinforces the idea that the gods are present among them, moving through their very streets. For a moment, even a poor spectator might feel uplifted, part of a grand cosmic pageant, not just a hungry bystander. There's also a very important dimension of religion that affects plebeians: the imperial cult. By the early empire, the emperors, starting with Augustus, encouraged, or at least allowed, the veneration of their genius, spirit, and that of Rome itself. Temples to the divine Augustus, or to the personified Rome, Roma, appear, and many plebs partake in ceremonies honoring the emperor's family. This isn't purely coerced propaganda. Many genuinely feel loyalty and almost familial devotion to a good emperor who provides for them. When Augustus died, for instance, historical sources note how commoners mourned sincerely and worshipped his memory. Marcus, in our chosen time frame, might light a candle at a little street altar on the emperor's birthday, or join cheers for the emperor during games. The plebs know that a benevolent emperor means more grain and games. A cruel or neglectful one could spell starvation. Thus, politics and religion blend. Showing piety to the imperial house is both a civic duty and a pragmatic stance for survival. We might liken it to patriotism combined with reverence. In fact, plebeians sometimes view the emperor as their protector, a sentiment cultivated by imperial propaganda, of course. For example, during a festival of the emperor's genius, plebeians might receive an extra olive oil ration or a one-time monetary donative, making the religious observance very tangibly beneficial. And in daily life, images of the emperor and his family, perhaps as small busts or on coins, might be placed near their trapdine. Household gods, a reminder that the imperial pater, patriae, father of the country, watches over all Roman families. Livia has a small terracotta plaque with a crude relief of the current empress, which she got from a market stall. She keeps it near the lararium, thinking the empress often associated with goddesses like Juno or Ceres in imagery, symbolically watches over mothers and children. Now, beyond formal religion, plebeians also have supernatural beliefs that we might classify as folklore or magic. In tough times, some might resort to a local wise woman or a charlatan selling charms. For instance, if Aurelia were dangerously ill and prayers at temples seemed not to work, Livia might consider a remedy like hanging a sachet of mystical herbs around the child's neck, or even consulting a so-called witch for a potion. These aren't state-sanctioned practices, but in a world without modern medicine, people grasp at any hope. There's a saying in Rome, amuletum docet. The charm teaches, meaning you learn by trying charms. Some might work. The plebs pass around tales of miraculous cures, hauntings, or curses. Marcus is a rational man in his way, but even he spat 3 times and muttered a protective formula when a funeral procession crossed his path last week, an old custom to ward off ill luck from death's presence. Life in the insula also fosters belief in household spirits. Beyond the official lares, penates, many swear that ghosts of those who died unburied roam at night. Indeed, with high mortality, there might be someone in the building who passed away and whose family couldn't afford proper burial, making the neighbors uneasy about a restless spirit. To appease such souls, during the festival of Lemuria in May, plebeians perform rituals like tossing black beans behind them at night, while saying, "With these beans I redeem me and mine," hoping to satisfy any lurking lemures, malevolent ghosts. Marcus does this bean throwing right each Lemuria just in case, as did his father and generations before. Religious festivals also bring plebeians and elites into contact in a positive way. For example, during the feast of Capitoline Jupiter On the Ides of September, the nobility lead a big sacrificial procession and afterwards hold a public feast on the capital, where traditionally tables are laid out, and all citizens can partake of the sacrificial meat, if enough is provided. While realistically, not every poor person gets a share, many do go to watch, and sometimes receive scraps or wine from generous patrons distributing leftovers. The plebs cheer the senators and magistrates on these occasions, partly out of reverence, partly hoping for alms. It's one of those instances where social roles are reinforced, the elites in their power doing the honors, the plebs applauding. Yet the plebeians are included in the collective identity of Rome, performing a sacred act. All these religious elements, daily piety, festivals, superstitions, weave a safety net of meaning under plebeian lives. For a modern person accustomed to scientific explanations and individualistic spirituality, the plebeian's world might feel saturated with what we'd call superstition or rote ritual. But in context, these practices are a rational response to their reality, lacking control over so many aspects of their environment: disease, sudden death, oppression. They find agency through appeasing higher powers and coming together in communal worship. The gods, to them, are not abstract. They are patrons of their city and personal guardians, as real as any flesh and blood patronus. If a plebeian has a bad day, say, they hurt themselves at work or lose a bit of money, they can console themselves that perhaps Mercury was unpropitious today, and tomorrow might be better if they make the right offering. This coping mechanism prevents despair. It's a way to frame life's randomness within an intelligible system of divine cause and effect. From the perspective of lasting a day in ancient Rome, a modern person might falter not only at the physical demands, but also at the mental landscape of constant appeasement of unseen forces. The modern mindset, used to personal freedom and perhaps secular outlook, could find it stressful or bewildering to have to remember so many rituals and to sincerely believe their fate hinges on pleasing numerous deities. For instance, consider living in fear that neglecting a minor household prayer could result in your child falling ill. That's pressure a modern person isn't accustomed to. But for Marcus's family, these rituals are second nature, taught from birth, providing structure and even comfort. To illustrate, let's imagine one specific festival day through the eyes of the family. The festival of Neptune, Neptunalia, in high summer, July 23rd. It's a lesser-known celebration where people build huts of branches and spend the day outdoors picnicking to honor Neptune, perhaps originally to appeal for water sources in the drought of summer. On that day, Marcus might take his family to the banks of the Tiber or outside the city gates. They join other plebs in weaving a makeshift shelter of leaves, a branch hut, and share a simple picnic, maybe bread, olives, and cheap wine diluted with river water. They laugh, splash in the water, relax under the shade, a rare break from toil. They pour a libation to Neptune, asking for the river's continued bounty and a break from the heat. That night, they return to their insula, a bit dusty and mosquito-bitten but happy. A modern person would see a humble outing. For the plebs, it's a cherished holiday, where even the poor can pretend for a day that they have a villa by the water. These sanctioned moments of leisure, tied to divine observance, are crucial. Without them, the drudgery would be unremitting. Finally, we should mention interactions with elites in religious contexts. because it's one area where plebeians could sometimes approach the powerful. During festivals, high-born Romans often acted as benefactors, distributing coins or food to the crowds, especially if they were standing for election in republican times, or under the emperor's eye in later times, to show generosity. A plebeian might take the opportunity of a religious celebration to petition an elite. For instance, at the feast of a patron saint, well, not saints in pagan Rome, but say, on Mars's festival, a veteran plebeian might approach a general to ask a favor, or at a temple, a poor mother might try to catch the ear of a magistrate's wife to plead for charity. The closeness of all classes at temple gatherings or games allowed some intercession. In a world without formal social services, the temple and festival gatherings sometimes served as an informal welfare office. The needy, hoping for alms, or imperial congiaria, doles, which were indeed often handed out on major anniversaries or imperial birthdays. In summary, the religious and festival life of plebeians is a rich tapestry that alleviates their suffering, strengthens community bonds, and keeps hope alive. It punctuates their calendar with meaning beyond survival. For a modern person dropped into this life, acclimating to the ubiquitous presence of religion, every decision and event framed in terms of divine favor would be challenging. One would have to learn a whole new set of cultural and spiritual reflexes on top of coping with physical trials. But for the Romans, these reflexes are what make life bearable and coherent. Religion is their solace, entertainment, and insurance policy in one. It explains the unexplainable and assures them that by doing their part, however small a sacrifice a plebeian can afford, they contribute to the collective stability of their world. This chapter explored how religious practices and festivals integrate into plebeian life, providing psychological relief and community solidarity. We saw that plebeians engage in daily household worship and eagerly partake in public festivals like Saturnalia, where social roles relax and even slaves and masters temporarily switch places. Religious observances offer holidays from work and often free food or entertainment, fulfilling both spiritual and material needs. The pervasive faith in God's protection helps plebeians endure their lack of control over worldly conditions. A modern individual would struggle to adjust to this constant reliance on ritual and divine favor as a coping mechanism. Chapter 4: Plebeians and the Powerful. Interactions with elites. In ancient Rome, the divide between the elite classes, the senators, equestrians, and wealthy patricians, and the plebeians, common citizens, is both deeply entrenched and yet, in daily life, often very immediate. Unlike in some later societies, where the poor might live entirely separate from the rich, in Rome's teeming capital city, the classes frequently bump up against each other in the streets, markets, forums, and public entertainments. This proximity means that a plebeian like Marcus regularly sees, hears, and even speaks with people of far higher status, whether it's a quick deference on the street or a formal request at a patron's door. These interactions shape a plebeian's experience profoundly. They are reminders of one's station, but also opportunities, however limited, to gain favor or resources. To a modern person accustomed to relative social equality, the everyday deference rituals plebeians show towards elites might be jarring. For instance, if Marcus is walking down a narrow street and a senator's litter approaches, carried by slaves, with the purple stripe on the litter's drapery indicating a man of senatorial rank, inside. Marcus will reflexively press himself against the wall or step into a doorway, lowering his gaze to let the noble pass. It's expected. Failing to show proper deference could invite at least harsh words, if not a beating by the noble's bodyguards. Even equestrians, wealthy non-senators, expect some marks of respect from commoners. In the forum, plebeians yield the right of way to magistrates, and their lictors, attendants bearing rods and axes, clearing a path. Titus learned from a young age to identify the sounds, the jingle of the bronze rods, or the shouted, "Make way," and quickly get out of the way. To our modern sensibilities, this is humiliating, but for them, it's the natural order. The plebeians often refer to elites with honorifics like domine, master, or domina for a lady, or simply sir domine, being literally master, often used by clients to patron. When Marcus interacts with his patron Lucius Aemilius, we saw he calls him domine and does not presume to speak first or at length. Plebeians also physically show subservience. A client might kiss the patron's hand or hem of his toga in gratitude. There's even an expectation in the patron-client relationship that the client will be something of a cheerleader or entourage for the patron. For example, if Lucius Aemilius stops by the forum to speak on some matter, his clients, including Marcus, might cluster behind him as a show of support, perhaps clapping at his statements or glaring at his opponents. The patron provides help, but the client gives loyalty and public honor in return. It's a reciprocal but asymmetrical relationship, rather foreign to modern ideas of independence. Outside of formal patronage, plebeians have other interactions with elites, commerce and labor. Many plebs work for or around the rich. Marcus's neighbor, for instance, is a fuller laundry worker who cleans the togas of senators, a smelly but vital job that involves urine-soaking cloth to bleach it. That neighbor must regularly enter the atriums of the great and deal with stewards or slaves of nobles, if not the nobles themselves. He's careful to be extremely polite, but he also gets insights into their lifestyles. Through such work interactions, plebeians learn tidbits of gossip or have fleeting moments of connection with the highborn. Sometimes a kind mistress of the house might give a tip or a leftover dish of food to a servant or worker. Other times, a rude noble might berate a plebeian cruelly for a small mistake. These experiences color how plebeians view the upper class, often with a mix of resentment and dependency. They know the elites can be haughty and exploitative. Juvenal's satires are full of plebs complaining about how they're treated as dirt by the rich, yet they also are taught that these same elites are their benefactors who secure Rome's glory and provide the bread and circuses. It's a conflicted relationship. One iconic venue of plebeian elite interaction is the Roman Forum and the basilicas, public halls around it. Here, on any given day, you'd find commoners listening as senators debate. In the Republican era, in the Empire, the Senate is less public, but public speeches still happen, or attending court cases where a famous advocate, like Cicero, in earlier times might be pleading. The public could attend these, effectively as spectators of justice. Plebeians sometimes even play roles as witnesses or hecklers in these public settings. During elections in Republican days, which by early empire are largely ceremonial or confined to Senate choices, plebeians have the power of vote in theory. They would gather in the comitia assemblies, grouped by their tribes or centuries, and vote for magistrates. In practice, the system was weighted to favor the rich, and by the empire, popular elections waned. But back when they were vibrant, the common citizens could sway results if unified. They might shout slogans, curry favor with candidates who promised games or better grain. The elites would come down among the plebs to campaign, shaking hands, often the origin of the word ambitus, or going around, which became a term for bribery, addressing them as quaerites, fellow Romans, even wearing shabby attire to appear humble. Political interaction thus had its theatre. Plebeians enjoyed seeing an aristocrat bow and scrape for their vote, even though the outcome was usually controlled by patronage networks. By Marcus's time in the early empire, such direct electoral politics is muted. The emperor and his circle decide most offices. Still, the plebs have not forgotten their collective power entirely. If grain is short or an outrage occurs, they might riot or demonstrate. Indeed, one of the few ways plebeians can force elites to listen is through public demonstrations. There's a Latin phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses, meaning that as long as the state provides food and entertainment, the masses are content. But if either fails, watch out. History recorded plebeian uprisings when grain shortages hit. Marcus has heard stories of how, during Emperor Claudius's reign, a grain delay nearly caused a riot until the emperor himself went down to the docks to calm the crowd. Plebeians know their mass voice is powerful when unified. In the Republican era, they even seceded from the city multiple times to get concessions like the tribune office. In the empire, they lack institutional power, but still have mob power. For example, if a particularly harsh official offended the populace, crowds might gather at the circus and jeer loudly when that official's name is mentioned, or if he appears, shaming him publicly, something that did happen. Emperors sometimes used the plebs as a barometer. If the urban plebs are unhappy, it could signal trouble or at least embarrassment. On a personal level, however, an individual plebeian is mostly at the mercy of any random elite's whim when directly interacting. Let's say Titus accidentally brushed against the litter of a wealthy matrona ladi on a busy festival day. If she's in a foul mood, she could order her slaves to strike him with rods for disrespect. Plebeians have little legal recourse. The testimony of a poor man often carries less weight than that of a noble, and patricians or senators have legal privileges. For instance, in the Republican period, a plebeian couldn't marry a patrician, though by empire, that distinction blurred. Under the law, technically all citizen plebs have rights, but in practice, who can afford a lawyer or bribe except the rich? So plebeians tread carefully. Marcus has taught Titus always to be extremely polite and submissive if confronted by a man with a broad purple stripe, senator, or even a narrow stripe, knight, on his tunic. It's a survival tactic. That said, not all elites are cruel or distant. Patronage, as detailed, is one institutionalized form of a kinder interaction. Some nobles take seriously the old ideal that wealthy Romans should act as patroni to lower-class clientela. This stems from the very founding of Rome, where Romulus supposedly invited refugees and freed slaves and made alliances between great and small. A conscientious patron, like, say, Trajan, before he was emperor, known as generous, might personally greet his clients and help them if they're in dire need. Some elite philosophers even admonish the rich to treat their slaves and clients humanely. Seneca, himself an elite, wrote about showing mercy and the common humanity shared across rank. These ideas circulate, So plebeians occasionally encountered genuine kindness. A noblewoman might fund a local almshouse or distribution of clothing for poor children at winter's kalends. A magistrate might sponsor a new fountain in a slum district, providing easier water access, etc. Such gestures endear them to the people. There's an example Marcus would know. The Edict of the Aediles, market overseers, sometimes posted rules about maximum prices for bread or about maintaining building safety. If an insula collapsed due to negligence, theoretically, the owner, often a rich man, could be penalized. These regulations are meant to protect plebeians and were pushed by more populist leaders or emperors. In AD 64, after the Great Fire, Emperor Nero, for all his faults, actually initiated a reconstruction with better safety codes and even built new housing. Plebeians evaluate elites based on how they handle crises. Those who show up with relief, handing out grain, waiving rent for a month, paying for burials of the poor, are praised in street gossip. Those who don't are cursed under people's breath. At public games, one sees a fascinating dynamic. The emperor or editor of the games, the sponsor, often an elite, sits in his pulvinar, special box, in the arena, and the plebeians fill the stands. There's almost a conversation. The crowd might chant requests or praises. If they want something, release the prizes, or complaining if the games are dull, their collective roar is heard. Emperors feared the wrath of the circus crowds to an extent. A famous instance is when Emperor Commodus faced jeers, or earlier when spectators protested an official and had him removed. In this way, plebeians could publicly and safely, under the guise of crowd anonymity, express approval or disdain for elites. It's a social valve. Marcus and Titus at the chariot races might join tens of thousands, yelling their hearts out, not just for charioteers, but also in political chants. For example, "Give us more grain," or "Justice for X." The clever emperors sometimes preempt this by making grand announcements at games. For example, the emperor might toss coins to the crowd or declare a new dole. Then the plebs erupt in cheers and chants of Augustus, or the emperor's name in gratitude. One could say the arena is a rare space of plebeian empowerment, albeit stage managed by those in power. Another area of contact is military service. Many plebeians joined the legions, especially after the Marian reforms allowed the capite censi, landless, to enlist. A soldier plebeian might find himself in close quarters with aristocratic commanders. While discipline is strict, a competent plebeian can rise to be a centurion, an officer class which, while usually from mid-level backgrounds, could include those of humbler origin who distinguish themselves. Veterans often retire with citizenship, if they weren't citizens, and land, elevating them. So a plebeian soldier's interaction with elites in the army might sometimes be more merit-based than in civilian life. Marcus was not a soldier, but he has friends who were, and they speak of generals who cared for their men versus those who didn't. The story of Julius Caesar endears him to plebs because he was said to know each soldier by name and share hardships, which they admired. Thus, plebeians revere some elites as heroes or pater patriae, father of the fatherland, when they show empathy and leadership. Conversely, they can hold deep grudges against aloof or cruel elites. A modern person might ask, could a plebeian ever become an elite? Social mobility is limited but not impossible. Through exceptional wealth or service, a plebeian might become an equestrian. Freedmen, ex-slaves, many of plebeian origin, could become remarkably rich in trade and indirectly influence politics or have elite patrons. Their children could be educated and possibly enter higher status. But generally, the average plebeian will not become a senator or high official. Those are largely closed circles. The conflict of the orders in early Rome, plebs versus patricians, had long ended by the empire. Plebeians had won rights like holding office. There were plebeian consuls long ago. By our time, the distinction patrician, plebeian, is less important than wealth and rank. So Marcus might be a plebeian, but so is a multi-millionaire grain merchant if he's not of senatorial family. That shows another interaction. Rich plebeians, equites, often serve as a bridge. A wealthy grain merchant plebeian might be patron to dozens of poor plebs, while himself being client to a senator. Thus, even within plebeians, there's a hierarchy, and poor plebs might rarely interact with top elites, but more with these middlemen. For the truly destitute plebs, often the only hope is to attract elite charity. There are anecdotes of plebs making placards or petitions. For example, a poor man might stand outside an elite's house each day, crying his misfortunes, until maybe the elite relents to help, or has him thrown out. The emperor's clemency or justice was sometimes directly accessible. Emperors would hold court days where citizens could bring petitions. Imagine a line of poorly dressed folk waiting to see the emperor's magistrate or the emperor himself at the palace gates with scrolls of complaint. Many plebes did present petitions written by professional scribes if they couldn't write, appealing a legal case or a tax burden. Sometimes these succeeded, especially if the emperor wanted to show himself as guardian of the people. However, one must also consider the fear plebeians had of crossing an elite. Laws like lex majestatis, punishing disrespect to emperor, or just raw power, meant if Marcus insulted a noble or got into a scuffle, he could be flogged or imprisoned easily. A noble killing a pleb might face some trial, but often a slap on the wrist if anything, so plebs often swallow their pride. A modern person might find this unjust and suffocating, not being able to speak up against a rude rich person or having to watch them flaunt wealth while you starve. Indeed, resentment simmers. There's a reason the later plebeian Christian movement gained traction, partly fatigue with the existing social order. But in Marcus's polytheistic world, change via ideology isn't on the horizon. Riots and appeals are the main recourse. One particular elite interaction that directly affects pleb life is the landlords of insulae. As mentioned, often senators or rich people own these buildings. They typically hire a building manager, insularius, to interface with tenants. That insularius might be the only elite agent a pleb converses with regularly, usually to pay rent or request repairs. Those requests often fall on deaf ears, since the owner's priority is profit. Rent in Rome is notoriously high. Marcus spends a big chunk of income on it. If he can't pay, the insularius can evict him swiftly. Unlike modern tenancy, with some protections, Roman landlords held the power. Many plebs ended up in worse slums or homeless if fortunes waned. On the flip side, if demand for rooms is high, and in Rome it always was, the landlord might jack up rents arbitrarily. There's no rent control beyond occasional grain subsidies, easing burdens indirectly. So plebs have a love-hate with their building owners. They rely on them to not raise rent or to fix a stair, and curse them when they don't. Often, these owners remain faceless figures to tenants, living in luxury while their properties deteriorate. It's a microcosm of the class divide. The wealthy, literally, above, figuratively, the plebs supporting from below. All considered, a modern person living as a pleb would probably find the necessary submissiveness and lack of voice extremely frustrating. One cannot call out an authority for wrongdoing without severe risk. One cannot demand better wages or conditions. There are no labor unions or voting rights to enforce change. You must navigate a patronage system, stroke egos, and depend on charity or luck to improve your station. The psychological toll of inferiority, constantly seeing palatial mansions and extravagant feasts while you scrounge, would wear down a modern sense of fairness. Many plebes cope by finding pride in being Roman. We might be poor, but we're Romans, conquerors of the world, and in their community, family, and neighbors. Also, some turn to cynicism or humor. The graffiti of Pompeii show plebs mocking elites in jokes scratched on walls, a subtle vent for discontent. In Marcus's case, he's pragmatic. He doesn't dwell on envy too much because it's pointless. The gods willed some to be high, some low, he might think, echoing what he's heard in temple sermons. He focuses on gleaning whatever advantage he can from interactions with the powerful, a kind word here, to get an extra loaf, a show of loyalty there, to secure patrons' protection. But if asked candidly, he might admit he dreams that his son Titus could someday enter the legions, do well, and be promoted to a position where he's not at everyone's mercy. That's a modest form of ambition, not to become a senator, unthinkable, but maybe to climb to being a respected centurion or a prosperous trader. In summary, interactions between plebeians and elites are a constant negotiation. The plebs must remain outwardly respectful and submissive, but they also know their collective importance. The elites, for their part, alternately ignore, exploit, fear, or placate the plebs, depending on circumstance. It's a delicate social dance that keeps Rome stable, usually. A modern individual might either chafe and rebel in such a position, risking punishment, or feel demoralized by the need to play humble all the time. But for survival in ancient Rome's stratified society, learning this interplay is essential. Marcus's day thus includes not only labor and family concerns, but also an almost second-nature awareness of who is who around him. Navigating that could be as challenging for a newcomer as any physical hardship. This chapter examined the daily power dynamics between plebeians and the upper classes. We saw how plebeians engage in structured deference, such as the salutatio, morning greeting, to patrons, as well as how they rely on patrons for material support. The patron-client system is a key example of interaction, ensuring plebeians some protection while reinforcing elite dominance. We discussed other contact points, at markets, in the forum, at public games, and via landlord-tenant relationships. Plebeians have limited means to influence elites, except through collective action or pleasing powerful individuals. A modern person would likely find this lack of equality and constant need for submission very hard to accept. Yet for a Roman pleb, it's an ingrained survival skill, their way of securing bread and circuses and avoiding the wrath of those above. In reflecting on all these facets of plebeian life, the relentless physical discomforts, the meager diet, the confinement under a paterfamilia's strict authority, the omnipresent religiosity required to cope, and the circumscribed dealings with the mighty, it becomes overwhelmingly clear why you, A modern person wouldn't last a day as a Roman plebeian in ancient Rome without considerable shock. The chasm between modern living standards and personal freedoms versus those of Rome's common folk is immense. Consider trying to sleep in Marcus's insula. The heat, the stink of the open sewer outside, possibly the sound of mice or insects skittering in the dark. No mattress, no fan or electricity, just a flickering oil lamp and the knowledge that the building itself might crumble. You awaken unrested and sore, relieve yourself in a pot and toss it out the window, hoping not to hit someone and hoping nothing lands on you from above. Breakfast is a bland porridge. No coffee, no fruit, unless by rare chance. You then carry heavy water jugs up flights of stairs since there's no faucet. Already, by 7 a.m., you're more physically taxed than many modern office workers after a full day. Then the psychological strain. You must hurry to your patron's house and humble yourself for a handout. Imagine bowing and addressing someone as master in exchange for a loaf of bread. Pride must be swallowed whole. Afterwards, you sweat and toil under a hot sun with no concept of an 8-hour labor law or workers' comp if injured. If you get hurt, you might be dismissed without pay. Serious injury could render your family destitute. There's no social security, no insurance, only hopefully the goodwill of neighbors or a God's mercy. Meals remain monotonous and scant. A modern person used to variety would find it hard to choke down barley mash day after day, feeling weak from lack of protein and vitamins. Indeed, many plebs likely had scurvy or anemia. Medical knowledge is minimal. A toothache could become a life-threatening infection. A cut might lead to deadly sepsis. For leisure, there's no digital entertainment, no books for the uneducated. Only occasionally, the rough excitement of the amphitheater or circus, which, while thrilling, are also bloodily violent events quite outside modern comfort zones. Your personal autonomy is extremely limited. If you're a woman, your father or husband legally controls your decisions. Roman women of the plebs rarely enjoy the semi-independence elite women could have. If you're a child, strict obedience is enforced. A father could even sell you into servitude in dire need, an unthinkable notion today. If you're a young man and frustrated, you can't freely criticize the government or powerful. Doing so could land you in chains for maestas. Cleanliness is a challenge. No running hot water or soap readily. So you likely go to bed most nights feeling grimy. And health-wise, you endure chronic ailments, untreated joint, pains, parasites from contaminated food, respiratory issues from smoke and dust. Life expectancy is short. Death is always near. You'd likely have seen siblings or friends die young and somewhat accepted it as normal, which a modern person would find traumatic. And yet, despite all this, millions of plebeians lived this life and found ways to persevere. They laughed, they loved their children, they formed friendships, they found meaning in religion and small joys in festivals or an unexpected kindness. It was a harsher world, one with little cushioning between a person and the brute facts of nature and hierarchy. The modern person, removed from those hardships by technology and political rights, stepping into that world, would feel as if thrown into a survival challenge with every system rigged against them. We often romanticize ancient Rome, its marble temples, philosophers, and heroes, but the reality for most was closer to Marcus's story. To truly imagine enduring, even a single day, requires shedding almost everything you take for granted: comfort, privacy, hygiene, personal choice, and a sense of equal standing. Your senses would be overwhelmed by the sights, smells, and stress. Your body taxed by the physical demands. Your psyche tested by the need for constant humility and risk calculation in dealing with those above you. Indeed, after experiencing Marcus's day vicariously, you might feel profound relief stepping back into the 21st century with its conveniences and rights. At the same time, you might carry a new appreciation for the resilience of those Roman plebeians who, in conditions we'd find intolerable, built families, jokes, traditions, in short, a life. Their world was unforgiving, but they adapted to it in ways a modern person could hardly learn in 24 hours. You wouldn't last a day is a figurative statement, of course. A modern time traveler dropped into ancient Rome would physically survive a day if lucky, but the phrase rings true in conveying how exceedingly tough that life was compared to ours. The smallest aspects of our daily routine, electric light, plumbing, varied food, legal protections, social mobility, would seem like fantastical luxuries to them. Conversely, their daily reality would strike us as almost unendurable. In conclusion, the life of a Roman plebeian is a stark reminder of how far human living conditions have evolved, and yet how human nature, striving for community, finding joy amid hardship, remains constant. Marcus and his family, though fictional composites, represent countless unsung plebeians who were the backbone of the eternal city. They survived conditions under which a modern individual would struggle or fail. So next time we admire Rome's ruins or read of its famous figures, we should also remember people like Marcus. They are proof that even in the absence of comfort and autonomy, the human spirit finds ways to cope and persist. But make no mistake, given a magic choice, likely any plebeian would gladly trade places with a person from our time, and any person from our time placed in theirs would swiftly yearn for the comforts of home. You, with your modern expectations and needs, truly would not last a day as a Roman plebeian, and if you did by grit, it would be a day you'd never forget.